I'm Reggie.
And I'm Brian.
And this is R&B Talks. Where we discuss and
venture,
pontificate,
undulate words from our minds.
Our tautology and our teleology and our Syndiffeonsis all comes together.
All right, so he just used the word Syndiffeonsis.
All means and wrapped up into a theory that we have that's called R&B Talks.
There you go. It's not a theory. Come on, man. We've been at this a while. You gotta give it a little love. Can't just be a theory. So Reginald.
Yes, sir.
What has haunted the vestige of your mind as of late, sir?
Man, look, it's all so here a prequel, I guess not prequel, but a surprise.
I was like, what are we talking about? Star Wars?
The CTMU and Chris Langan and some of his stuff. That's what we're talking about today. So I've literally been consumed with this week. Now, that's not, and the thing is, I really didn't want to be this consumed about it, but
you don't have a choice.
Well, okay, let me explain this. Now that I'm not in school and being dictated what I have to study,
yes,
there's like a mountain of books that I've bought over the last 6 or 7 years on the to-do list of things that I want to get to, right? So there's 3 Michael Heiser books that I want to read about the one that I already started, but I keep getting interrupted by other things, but The Unseen Realm, and there's a couple of them like Andrew Klavin's book about him becoming a Christian from a Jew, and the Vivek book Truth is I just recently got that. There's like a whole host of theological stuff like the Habermas's volumes on Revelation and stuff. There's just a ton. So, but here I am this week. You asked about this week. Yes, this week has been all about Chris Langan.
Dude, to say that this guy's intellectual pool is deep is to really, really, really poorly represent what this man is about. I listened to several interviews, all of which at the end, I was left with far more questions than I had answers. But I like that sometimes. I like to have to chase the thing. And but he's a very interesting guy. And the reason he's a very interesting guy is because he is utterly not concerned at all with status, wealth. He's literally lives on a farm and was a bouncer and was raised in a poor family and really just chased knowledge all his life. Really chased knowledge, right? Like that's a pretty impressive resume. And I take someone like that intellectually very seriously.
Yeah, I mean, so this was one of those where I wanted to look into this. This was my idea because I've heard about this so I'll spell it out. The Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, CTMU, is a I would call it. It's kind of, everybody calls it all kinds of different things, but it's like a freaking science meets philosophy meets metaphysics meets cosmology, reality theory, kind of all over the place.
In the most simple terms, I found a very simple definition that he gave for it in a print.
You had to look.
Article.
Well, before you do that, you had to do that, and I'll say that because the actual paper that he wrote back in 2002, I believe, is when it was published. And I'll put the link in there just in case. But it's only, so for one, it's only 56 pages. So for an academic thing like this, of this nature, to be 56 pages is pretty interesting anyway. But it's not written like anything academic. Well, it might have some of the structure, some of it, but it doesn't, it's not it's not written as an academic paper, and it's on purpose because he doesn't like academia. So,
well, let's just give a little background,
here
right? His IQ is somewhere on different test scans, his IQ has come in anywhere between 195 and 210. Now, just to give you an idea, I took an IQ test, I think it was 10 years ago, and I scored right around a 118, and I was told that that's a good IQ test. That's a very good score.
Yeah.
Okay. He scored a 195 to a 210. That's a level of brilliance and mental acuity that I don't know that I would, if you unlocked all of my brain, I would be able to get to.
He does qualify IQ because he does say kind of IQ doesn't really matter.
Yes.
And I totally agree with this. What he answered it pretty clear. Like higher IQ people can focus more on one problem and really be able to take their mental energy and focus on one problem. That makes total sense to me, right? But when you start what he said was expanding out the lens, and you look at a broader picture, that's more difficult.
Yeah, he's apparently people with very high IQs are laser focused. I know several people with higher IQs that are very able to focus on a singular thing. But he says they don't have, big picture thinking would be the best way to say it.
But he said, so here's a couple things that I found fascinating though. He always remembers what he dreams.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. Like that, because I only remember about 5% of what I dream, but he remembers everything that he dreams.
Yeah. Now here's the thing. Okay. We're kind of taking this man's word for a lot of things.
Yes.
Right. And it's not that I say there's like reason to be like, he's indicated there's some kind of nefarious purpose for anything he's saying. But I do believe, like, there's a lot of things that you just got to understand that it's just you're taking his word for this stuff, like that one. No one's going to test that, No, he can't test
the CTMU. That is his theoretical.
That's his.
Yeah,
right.
And a basic definition of that was a self-simulation theory of the relationship between mind and reality. That's a basic kind of, if you need it in 10 words or less.
Okay. Let me say I think there's some key things that need to be kind of addressed before we even talk about what that means.
Lay it on me, homie.
Okay. For one, he realized there was a term that was needed. I think it's key for this is Syndiffeonsis.
Yeah.
Which really means sameness in difference in sameness. It's kind of works both ways. And the only reason why that's important is because he looks at reality and the fabric of the universe as having is what he calls, well, it's syntactic, meaning It has syntax. There are expressions and rules that govern and that can be applied to this. Therefore reality is like a language.
Yeah.
Okay. So what he was, and I think the way okay, let me preface this. And then here's I guess I would say this would be like a footnote at the bottom saying, note, warning, Reggie and Brian are not cosmological or metaphysical gurus or anything like that. So our understanding of things could be completely wrong.
I think we also ought to say our interpretation of this is our own. It's not.
Yeah. So
we're not trying to say that ours is correct or
debate anything.
Or this is basically us. I think you would agree with this. Us sitting back and kind of marveling at someone's intellect.
But right? Also too, I think it's important. And I think like asking questions about the nature of reality and like what is reality and how does reality exist and what's contained in reality. All these kind of, I think that's critically important.
All
right?
legitimate questions.
Right. But what I would say though is like if like, Joe Schmo who works as a contractor through the day and, he wouldn't pick up the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe paper and go, cool, I can understand this, right? So in a lot of ways, what my goal here for this is just to kind of say, if there's anybody out there that, you know, can't understand this stuff, we don't either. Like, it's not like I can pinpoint everything and like teach it to you, but what I want to do here is just bring awareness to what this is. And that it's, whenever you have a guy like Chris Langan, because there's been people like this, like you're talking about more, well, we don't know for sure, but we're saying Einstein was around a 180 IQ is what kind of generalized numbers they throw around. There was Da Vinci was supposed to be over 200 or something like that, or like that. When you have characters like this that exist in your lifetime, I just feel like if they're really that smart, you should really pay attention. Everybody should.
Yeah.
So getting back to this, Syndiffeonsis, sameness and difference and sameness, basically because in this theoretical model where you have a syntactic environment where there's rules and everything else, if you see something and somebody sees something, you're perceiving that, and even in the difference of your perceptions, it can be rooted down into the reality in which it exists, and therefore have a sameness in its attribute that is able to be perceived.
Yes, I would agree with that statement.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I was trying to dial that down, right? For that. Another key thing that's a part of this is tautology. Tautology is basically that a statement is true, and this is Webster Dictionary, by virtue of its logical form alone. It means like it's true in itself, in internal, external, descriptive, whatever, that is true. It's pretty much an absolute. Tautology is like it's true regardless of anything else. It's true, right? And then teleology, which is the use of design or purpose as an explanation of natural phenomenon, the study of evidences of design in nature. Purpose. It's like, that's what we're talking about with that purpose. And I think those are critical for how you understand, like anything to do with what he's talking about with reality. Because his self-simulation theory so the self-simulation principle is bound around the idea that reality is not only self-simulation, but it's self-organization, and it's self-governed.
There are definitive laws with which everything is run by, and one of the things that I like to kind of tied into what you were talking about was the way he when Michael Knowles asked him, is God real? And his answer was brilliant, because what he says was, what has to come from a source, essentially, right? Like, he talked about intelligent design. Like, in his mind, there's no doubt that there is intelligent design, right? That you can't question intelligent design. To him, things like the Big Bang Theory, evolution are all just, they're garbage. He considers that garbage science. Like, causality is proof of God, right?
Yeah.
And that to me was a very interesting statement to make. Now, I also want to say to anybody of theological that's watching this or theology background, there is a lot of things that he said that I found interesting, but there are also a lot of things that he said that I found to be well outside the gospel.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, okay. I'll say this on that particular thing. Like it to me, this is what always has made me a little inquisitive. All right. When you study biblical principles, or you study the Bible itself, or you study theology or some other form of theology or whatever, you use scripture as the foundation for what you build upon. For anything theology, really, it has to be rooted in the scripture. Or else it's just BS, right? Yeah. But the thing is, to me, and I think as awesome as the biblical, and I'll use another meta narrative of the canon,
Yes.
is, which it is. I don't want to make this sound like it's discounted, but God authored this huge 60 something books with over, however many, tons of authors over a 2,000 year period that all lines up and syncs up and has all those things, which is a miracle in itself. But it's not, the purpose of it isn't for an intellectual.
Yeah, it's not.
The Bible is meant for every person, right?
It's meant for all to understand.
So there's a lot of things left for, if you really get deep into things that aren't answered.
Yeah.
You can extrapolate some more definitive natures of reality and existence from what the Bible says, but like, it's not that the purpose of the Bible is to lead you to Christ as the gospel message, and that's really the purpose.
The best way to say it is the Bible has a definitive narrative to lead you to the truth.
Yes,
which is Christ is King. God is
He is the Savior.
Sovereign.
He is He's the redemption and the rescuer and the salvation for the human race. Now, why I say that is because I think this is excellent to like think about and dig into, because there are some things that it's not really, there's details of our existence that aren't in the Bible that we can search for through other means. Yes. So when I look at stuff like this is one way to kind of see what else in this picture is there, right? Mm-hmm. And so I spent so much time on this. I knew about Chris Langan years ago. I just never had time to look in his theory, which is kind of why I proposed it, really. But anyway, so getting back to this, reality as a self-contained, self-simulating system, where consciousness is integral to how reality functions. That's kind of more about what it is. Okay. So another thing that he mentions about his theory is that consciousness and reality are inseparable. Did you have any thoughts about when he talked about how that was? Because we were talking about this earlier, like someone's perception.
Yes, I didn't. This is one of the things when he spoke about it, I struggled with, because he had this kind of resonating theme in a lot of what I listen to of, because you think it is real. Which, I mean, you could possibly bind that to the narrative in the Bible of, if you're thinking about lust, then you're lusting. Your thought is reality, right? There's ways to cross that over, but I think he speaks about it in a broader way that I'm not real comfortable with. Like, if I think I'm Spider-Man, it doesn't mean I'm Spider-Man, right? Like, my thoughts don't necessarily narrate my reality, right? Correct. But for him, he pushed very hard in the direction of, well, if you can think it, it's real. And I don't know that I was able to delineate what exactly he was chasing with that statement, because I think part of the problem I had with this was, even with Michael Knowles, who's a very intelligent man, it's hard to argue with a guy with a 195 IQ who's studied, philosophy and spirituality and all these things and is very learned. He would say certain things but because he has a very strong presence in his intellect, he didn't feel a need to explain. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let me help.
Thank you.
So there's a part of this where he talks about how self-contained, self-simulating system, in that all of reality exists, that basically if the universe is all what is real. God is like the meta ultimate reality, right?
He's the meta narrator is what he is.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But he's existing inside the universe.
Well, see, that's another thing that I struggle with.
Right. Well, that's where I was going.
Right.
For me, in order for it seems logical, but now I don't have a 200 IQ. So mine's only like 140 something. But if you look at God, you say like, okay, in order to do this, orchestrate and kind of be pull the strings and everything in order to make this reality everything it is. Even for it to exist, I would think he would have to exist external and internal to that. That just would make sense to me. It also doesn't answer the spiritual realm of like the all that stuff that probably exists as far as that goes too. So when I think about this whole like, because one of the statements I've always hated, I've hated it, is perception is reality.
Yeah, that's the dumbest thing I've ever.
But
because we've proven there's 1,000 different ways to fool the eyes.
Yeah, exactly. But and even when Chris is talking about this stuff, he talks about how like if you perceive it, then it has to like it's both your perception and the physical realm both that equate to a reality of things, right? So it can't just be someone who's just out off their rocker and imagining something happen. There has to be, to me, there would have to be a correlation with the physical world in order for that perception to become real. Now, but he also says in some interviews, well, it's real to them. And I think that's a little confusing for me. Like, if you need both are inseparable, then they both have to kind of be in congruence with each other. Then I would imagine that perception and physical kind of need to align together in order to equal reality.
Well, I think that's part of us that I struggle with that a little bit because as I've studied other religions, like I'll use Rastafarianism as an example, they kind of think that way. The reality is your thought, right? I don't know that that's necessarily the case. And I think part of that is when you get into that feeds into the thing he talked about panatheism and the things that are, God is the world and the world is God and they're all intertwined.
Well,
and
we are, what do you say? We are sensors.
Yeah.
We are God's vehicle for sensing the locality of reality.
Which I don't necessarily know that I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that either.
I don't agree with that at all.
Well, I mean, but a bit, again, he could be totally right.
If God is an all-powerful God, if God is completely in control of everything, he does not need me to be a censor for him as to the world.
Yes. Now
that to me sort of takes away some of the veracity of God's power. For me to have to be existent for God to be able to have a sense in whatever reality and realm and whatever I'm dealing in, I feel like that kind of takes away from the veracity of God's power.
I think where this goes is pretty much like us being connected to everything and everything. We are a part of everything. We are a part of reality. So therefore our consciousness is part of reality, right?
Yes.
That's he doesn't say it quite like that, but that's kind of what I got out of it.
Kind of felt like that's where he was going.
So when he's talking about like our cognitive perception is part of what can be real, I think that's because if we are truly physical and spiritual beings who are part of the same, universal, well, even going back to the whole ecologies of faith thing, even with all our ecologies are connected, and therefore the ecology of reality is therefore tied into everything that we are. Yeah. Then you're whatever we're thinking and our cognitive perceptions and ideas and stuff are therefore connected as well in some way. That's kind of what I think he's trying to get to.
I know, but I feel like he's going more to the pantheistic side of things.
Maybe.
Right. And the reason I say that is if you look at it, pantheism is non-theistic, right? Like it doesn't.
Yeah,
it doesn't believe in a separate God. We are God. God is the nature and the whole.
That's what he says.
That's what he says. But, if you look at some of the differences, God's nature in Christianity is a personal being who is distinct from the world and transcends it. In pantheism, God is not a person. He is an inanimate in the universe or identical to it. The relationship between God and the universe in Christianity, God created the universe and sustains it, but is not identified with it. In pantheism, God and the universe are one and the same. The role of the universe in pantheism is the universe is divine and should be treated as sacred. So I think he tends to lean more into that pantheistic side of things with the philosophy of his philosophy of what God is. A good example of that is his idea of heaven and hell. Like, yeah. I'll be a bit flat. If he was sitting here right now, I'd be like, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with, somehow, it brings me back to like the Matrix. Well, if you live a good life, we're going to plug you back into the Matrix where everything's perfect and everything's good. But if you're a bad person, you're desperately going to want to live. So you're going to build your Matrix reality into an evil reality, right? Yeah, like I don't necessarily I don't at all ride with that philosophy. Let's just be clear.
Yeah.
There's a heaven and a hell, and it's very distinct what they are in the Bible. So you don't really have this well, you create your hell, right? No.
This is where I think they're excuse me, where there has to be this other spiritual realm involved in anything we're talking about. Because if we're talking from a Christ-centered perspective.
Yes.
Now he does say God is incompatible with evil or whatever.
Very much so. Yes.
Okay. Well, sure.
He cannot look upon imperfection or evil because it would be, it would be antithetical to what he is.
But sort of. Well, we'll save that for later. But
well, that's what he says. Now, whether that's true or not.
Yeah, I mean, but there's some. I mean, that's not how. I guess I wouldn't put it that way. But you know what? If we could get Chris Langan into our show and interview him, that would be fantastic. But
that's right. You got an open invitation, Chris Langan, to come in to R&B Talks, the hottest podcast in New Salisbury.
So.
Sorry, I couldn't.
No, it's okay. So the thing about this is that, without having a spiritual realm where you do have a definite place where God resides in his spiritual nature, I think there needs to be something there, right? That dictates a place. And when he's talking about how if you reject God, then he turns away from you. In a sense, that's what he does, though, in Christian perspective. Like, if you were to be in full rebellion of God, you don't recognize him ever, you die, he does. He sends you to a place where he's not there.
But here's another problem I have is if we're in the Matrix and God plugs us back into the Matrix and then we can create our own hell and we can create our own heaven, then that sort of negates the judgment of God.
Yeah, I don't say that. I
don't want to negate the fact that there is going to be judgment, right? It's very clear, right? But unfortunately,
no, the way Langdon explains is very much like, when you create your own, pretty much your own non-existence.
Yeah,
it's pretty much what it is. But if you've accepted God and God welcomes you back in, then you are welcomed into his ultimate reality.
Yeah,
right. So I mean, that's and of course too, there's more to that, and that's what I mean by like how Langdon really approaches this stuff is at a very high level, and it's hard to like be from an R&B Talks to Langdon level. There's like this whole vast ocean in between.
But I'm going to say this too, and this might sound very egotistical when I say it, and I don't mean it to, but I don't think that's true. And the reason is, I think that God built us all to question.
Yeah, I don't mean that either.
And I think that he built intellects like Langdon and others to challenge us to ask these questions, right? I think everything that God does has purpose. So I don't think Chris Langan was placed here purposelessly, right? Like I think listening, one thing I learned from listening to him, and let me be clear, and I say this with all humbleness, I am a Botard compared to Chris Langan as far as intelligence goes. Like the papers that I read and the studies that I've read and the interviews I've listened to, his intellect is so vastly superior to mine. But I love these kinds of things, and this is why I love this podcast, because you and I search for things that are bigger than we are, not just to get a message out there for Christian men and women if they're listening, but to challenge ourselves to make sure that we're constantly looking to grow in our mindset and how we believe and how we apply our beliefs. So I don't believe that that's necessarily a true thing. I think that those challenges are placed purposely for you and I to attempt to climb a little bit higher in our understanding, right? So,
well, and I mean, how would I say this? I look at things like, I think I have a pretty good grip on what the gospel is.
I think we both do.
I think I understand the principles that bind the Bible together and cause the old and new to be connected through Christ. And looking at from the very beginning of creation through the future that we haven't seen yet is through the lens of a Christ follower. I got that, right? Not that there's not more to learn or study or whatever. That's why we got people who've in academia who do this their whole life and they're not studying everything. They're just like, little bits. But this helps. This for me, just I enjoy looking at this because it helps bring about some other natures of things. Like for instance, when I read like philosophical works or papers from whatever academic person it is about, who knows, whether it be about physics or some kind of morality theory or I don't know, anything like that, right? I mean, I enjoy doing that because it helps me understand more about some aspect of what someone else was thinking, and that to me is intriguing. Right. Yeah. And the reason why this is so intriguing is not only because I think reality is important, obviously it is, but that this guy speaks to it in a way that you just don't see.
Yeah.
So moving on, like he mentioned, I think like we talked about before, the syntactic nature of reality, that it's a syntax. So I think it's not just a language and we need to understand it. Like mathematics is a language too. Yeah. And that's really where he's going with it. It's like, because there is like rules and symbols and expressions that govern reality. Mm-hmm. Like, and I think he called it meta-mathematical. I think that's the word hold on. I think I wrote it down. Yeah. The universe as a meta-mathematical system.
Which in turn is essentially meta-causation. Right.
Right.
So,
okay. Because you have a cause, you have an effect.
Yeah.
But also too, he does mention that the CTMU kind of merges the causation versus randomness kind of scenario work, because you do have this governing body that is at the top of this reality that does regulate and govern things, which is different from just a universe based totally on causality. So there's that difference. Now, keep in mind, some of this stuff we could really get into on their own, but that's not really the purpose of this.
Yeah.
Now I did find this. Here's another thing for you, Brian. There's a dual aspect of the universe, because he does, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, but he does mention a physical and a mental aspect, right? Because we have the physical aspect about our senses, like how we perceive the real things, like touch, see, smell, hear, that kind of stuff. But then you have what's kind of the mental aspect is like the informational structures involved, or logical structures. Like, because if you even take, and I think this goes back to even the veils. If you think about things and like how all of existence is bound around some kind of math.
Yes.
Even our DNA.
Yeah. Numbers are in the Bible.
Well, the numbers are everywhere.
Everywhere.
So as far as that goes, there are definitely information that is bound in all of reality, right?
Yes.
It's there. Therefore, there is an ultimate information. I wouldn't say calculator, but what do I say? Data bank or something. I don't know I don't even know what word I would use for that, but God serves as this ultimate informational archive or something, you know?
Yes.
If you want to put it like that, or computational.
I'd say an archive, all knowing informational archive would be a good way to say it.
Yeah. That's kind of how I see that, but that might be too shallow.
No, I don't think so.
But also they both work together, right? So you have the physical, and this is kind of where I was going with how that consciousness and reality work together. Because if your perceptions, your senses work together with the information and logical side of things that also is there, you have all those working together, then congruency has to happen in order for that to be real.
Yeah.
Which, like, I'd love to see like actual math that says that, you know what I mean? Like I didn't, now he in his paper, he has like these equations that he says, hey, look at this. This is how this would be expressed. And that was beyond me to see that. He obviously knows more about this.
Well, I mean, I think a lot. I mean, on top of that, I think let's be clear, I am not a proponent of psychedelic drugs or anything of that nature. But when he talks about there being particular people who are not predisposed to misusing psychedelics, those people are capable of opening up a sliver and looking into the veil a little bit. There's just things that he talks about with such capability and ease that I listen to and I go, because I can't really do anything else, right? So, but I and again, he covers so much in so many different things, metacausation being one of them, that cause and effect, and that cause and reality themselves are tied together. He talks about, which is part of where I tend to disagree a little bit, because there are things that can cause reactions that in my mind are not real reality reactions, delusions, things like that you can have. We've all seen situations where people have, maybe had some kind of mental break from ill processing of information and assume that they are God, or there are things that happen that these things that he talks about. I just don't know if I'm there with him on those things, because I'm really, and maybe it's because biblically the narrative is driven so deep in me as it's written. The gospel that you and I understand is very clear, right? There's no gray area in the gospel, right? So, and for him, I feel like, I don't want to call him gray areas because he's distinctive when he talks about them. He doesn't really, he's very driven to a point when he talks about them. Like when he talks about everything has a starting and ending point. There are no, what did he call them? Slices?
I think he used,
or slices. They're, you're slicing from here to here. Like if you make a cut, there's a beginning point and an end point of that cut. Now he goes, the cut may go like this, but there's a start and a destination, beginning and end, right? So I say that to say there's a lot that I don't understand, a lot that I disagree with, but a lot, maybe more I disagree with it because I don't understand it as clearly as he does. Like you said, his mind is so much more vastly intelligent than mine. There may be things he understands that I have no understanding. I mean, if you look at that biblically, you look at people like Moses and all the things that he went through in his story. There were understandings that Moses had that I will never have.
When I think where did I read this at? I got my notes here, but okay. During an interview, or not an interview, but one of the CTMU radio segments talked about purpose of the universe. And this might help with this whole thing too. The purpose of the universe is the self-identification of God. Mm-hmm. So that's how he explained it. God is identifying what parts of himself to keep and what parts not to keep. The existence we live in is a test for that identification. And this is where he called us censors.
That's
right?
Kind of deep. It's really deep, actually.
Yeah. I don't, but his distinction as God is derived by us active sensor controllers.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he kind of called us, sensor controllers, right? And because God is global and not local, to put it in his terms. So how I understood that in relation to the mental, physical, the cognitive, and not all being part of God. And I think this goes back to when I was looking at this, I thought of the passage in some of the passages in Psalms, and some of the other stuff that says, creation itself screams that God, that there is a creator.
Yeah.
And how big and massive God is because of creation.
Yeah.
So if I try to apply that, we see the distinction and the identity of God through what he's created in the universe. Like that's totally evident by reality itself in the universe that it's made of. But but again, we get into, this is a whole, our whole purpose as sensor controllers to like either accept him and he lifts us up as we have accepted that into his reality that he can keep, or we reject that and therefore we are then non-existent and go away. That's the part where it gets into the Christian idea of that stuff is not so easily pulled into his explanation of the purpose of the universe.
Well, that begs the question. Let me make sure I'm asking this question correctly. Maybe this is more of a curiosity statement than it is a question. Okay, so according to Langdon, God is the ultimate reality. If you do not know God, then you are not part of the ultimate reality.
You will not be.
You will not be. But if metacausation is what he says it is, wouldn't that mean that once you accept Christ, you get plugged into that reality? Because we begin to understand things once we accept Christ, because the Bible's a living word, right? So it changes for us as we move through time. So wouldn't we already in some way, shape, or form be plugged into God's ultimate reality? But if we choose to reject God, if we as evil, as he put it, I'm not saying evil as an evil killing, but he used the word evil.
I gotcha.
As evil, wouldn't we be, would this world that we're in of chaos and disorder and confusion and all those things, couldn't that explain? And this is theory, right? Going on what he said, couldn't that explain things like, the onset of groups like BLM and transgender and all these things happening because they are not part of that ultimate reality. So they're dumped into this world where evil sort of runs things. The evil matrix is running things, right? So by definition or standard of what he's saying, wouldn't that be more likely to match what he's saying than what is being actually said biblically? Would that make sense?
Well, yeah. I know I get what you're saying.
Understand what I'm trying to get after?
I do.
Yeah.
I would say identity, like, okay, when we talked about identity,
Yeah.
we were very explicit that it's critical.
Yeah.
It's one of the most important things that we can, one of the most concepts that we as people can go get completely wrong, and it completely changes our whole entire realm of our existence throughout this entire life. It can wreck it.
Because we can take terrible measures to make things happen that are irreversible in our lives.
When I was, the whole time I was reading any of this stuff, I was always trying to think about like my own theological perspectives on things to say like, where would this line up? How could it line up? Because it can help extrapolate farther than what the biblical text can go in some ways. Maybe not. The important things is obviously in the Bible anyway, but so let me say this about that. I would say, as according to, if we go by Langdon's CTMU, and we tried, and we basing it off of that, when we make the conscious choice to say Jesus is our exemplar, to use a word that he used, that he is the way, the truth, the life, then we are plugged into the ultimate reality at that point. Because now we've accepted the exemplar. We're trying to be that exemplar. We exist with the Holy Spirit, and according to Christian, right? So at that point, we're now plugged in to the ultimate reality.
Okay, now that begs this question, and I'm approaching this from someone who might be on the outside. All right, so my transition happens. I accept the ultimate reality of God. I'm plugged in. Well, God cannot look on imperfection. So once I'm plugged into his perfect reality, wouldn't that take away all the things that are because, I mean, if I'm plugged into his perfect reality isn't going to have sin and death and all these things. But see where I'm starting to break from his philosophy a little bit, because
but that gets into the whole once saved, always saved argument.
Actually, to me, that gets into the whole choice thing.
Well,
right?
It does. But even Langdon himself says we are still free will entities that are working together for in conjunction with that reality to try to reach ultimate reality, right?
Yeah.
So I think that even though we're plugged into that ultimate reality, we're still free creatures. We're still autonomous and have agency in what we do. So it's the same thing when I say, if we have the Holy Spirit that dwells in us as a Christ follower, we're still going to sin and everything. So this comes back to I've heard a sermon like this that said, well, once you sin, this Holy Spirit leaves and all that kind of stuff. But I don't believe that at all. I don't think that's what happens at all. Right? So it's the same kind of thing where even though, because you got to understand, even though God is not compatible with imperfection, he still became flesh and lived in this world in all of the worldness that could happen You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like anything we can see that from Christ, that when Christ lived on this earth, it's not like he couldn't walk around and be around people. Because I mean, obviously, if he wasn't compatible, he wouldn't be able to exist like that.
But wouldn't he be the ultimate example of being plugged into that perfect reality?
Well, exactly.
Right?
That's why I think when Langdon calls him the exemplar, that's exactly what that is. That's like saying this is the humanity's exemplar of what it means to be completely and totally plugged into ultimate reality. Like there is no deviation from that if you are fully able to completely be at one with ultimate reality.
Okay.
I think that's how we have to look at it. Like when we're saved, we choose to follow Christ, and we get, now we get accepted, and we're now trying to reach that point. We're reaching towards Christ.
Yeah.
Not that we're walking in the heavens with God hand in hand in his presence as the sinful creatures that we are.
Yeah.
But we're still plugged into it.
Which that begs the final question I'm going to ask. Isn't God's ultimate reality heaven?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. So he doesn't, none of this stuff, that's what I'm saying. None of this stuff, he does talk about demons, and he does say demons and angels and all that stuff. He does recognize that. But I didn't quite get, and this could be my missing that would, or maybe that question didn't come up in any of the stuff I looked at, but like, I would say that there has to be an extra dimensional realm, so to speak, outside the universe for things that defy the rules and laws that govern the universe itself. So when he talks about everything that is real is reality, and that our universe encapsulates all that is real, well, but there are these, if demons and angels and God exist, and they exhibit attributes that aren't aligned with how the universe is built. So in other words, God is timeless. He exists all the time, all knowing, all powerful, right? So how that doesn't align with a linear moving universe through time, right?
No, it doesn't.
So to me, that would mean that he has to be external to that universe, but that's not how the CMTU or CTMU, sorry, outlines that, right?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Now again, if I really wanted to understand his paper, let me just say that I really tried.
So did I.
I really tried. So I had to look at a lot of different things in order to really come up with my own conclusions to what I could describe this stuff. Because I don't think we're sensor controllers. That doesn't actually line up with things of my nature that God needs anything. The fact that I think our perceptions are definitely part of reality, but to say that every perception we have is reality, it would make me shake my head. Those are the questions I would have. The nature of God being the ultimate reality, on one hand seems, oh yeah, he's at the focal point of everything, which could possibly be it. But I think because of his even going back to his triune nature, if you look at the Judeo-Christian idea of God and having Holy Spirit, God, and Jesus as there, would even go farther than that to say that he exists differently than everything else in the universe. So yeah, maybe he is that, but that could just mean he's plugged in and governing the universe and reality as we know it. But there's also this other aspect of God that is outside of that, right? So to me, that's where I draw some differences between the CTMU and
the actual gospel.
Yeah. Christ is also like, sure, he's an exemplar, but he actually doesn't outline Christ as being God. Matter of fact, he said, oh, hold on, let me find it. He called him a divinely certified leader of the faithful and an exemplar of humanity. The present function of Jesus, the ideal, he's the ideal of human perfection. The discrepancies between various religions about who Jesus was is irrelevant because he's the ideal human perfection.
Yeah.
He talks about Buddha and Muhammad and something like that, and he completely trounces on it because, and this goes back to identity. I mean, using his what he talked about when he talked about the Buddhist ideology, where the whole purpose of Buddhism is to be nothing.
Yeah,
completely identifiable at that point, which is conversely true of what he's saying is absolutely what you should do. His thing of Muhammad, like, you know, he's this brutal warlord who puts things to the sword. That's not anybody you want to look to or anything like that.
No.
Anyway, so I guess to kind of say this, there's reasons why Langdon's papers and stuff have not made it into academia. Because he doesn't write like he doesn't do things like academia does, and he doesn't like academia. He doesn't even want to have anything to do with academia. For what?
Not a fan.
No. He even said in a couple of his interviews, like, you know, he's not because he goes, one of the most popular questions they ask him, why is he not a billionaire? Well, he doesn't care about money. He doesn't care about this, and he doesn't like billionaires. He doesn't want to like billionaires, and so therefore they don't like him. So he's not going to be in that circle. Very true. Which is, you know, he kind of makes that statement as well. But in the end of the day, I mean, I think this stuff is interesting and can illuminate some parts of our own reality we exist in more full. But at the end of the day, I think that some of this stuff it has some questions, right? And I'm not going to dare say that Langan's wrong, because I don't really care about his IQ. I really, I don't really care about that. I just, he obviously has a brilliant mind. And there are all these questions that I think I'd want to have answered. Now, he may have answered all these, by the way. I just may not have found them. But I would love to see that. There are some, when I was looking around at some other things, though, did you, Brian, did you happen to see any of his, like when he did some podcasts and stuff with other realities or philosophers or anything?
I did not. No, I didn't. I got so wrapped up in his paper and a couple of the just interviews that I was like, at the end, my brain was completely.
Well, in his paper, the first part of it, before he even gets to his own theory, he talks about why other reality theories are wrong, you know, and even going through that, you're reading the words, you're like, you understand what the word, like each word means, but when they get put together, you're just like, I don't.
Yeah. It's an impossible string to follow. Like there were several times I had to read something 8-10 times to even surface decipher what it may have meant, and I'm probably still not right. So yeah, it's pretty tough, man. But overall, I think if you're out there and you're looking for a different view of things, or you want to hear some very interesting academic level theories, may not be an academic himself, but definitely intelligence times 10. I think he's an amazing source. I don't know, man. This was a deep one. I got to tell you guys, when Reggie threw it at me, I very nonchalantly went, yeah, okay. I can do that. And then I started reading and called Reggie, and I was like, Reggie? Duh. And then Reggie was like, I got it. I was struggling with it, man. I'm not going to lie. But I'm really glad that I stuck with it and got into it, because, I mean, he touches on some things that really, really draw you into asking some very good questions.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, this helps you identify the intelligent design argument is just mute. With even just a fraction of this being understood, just the way he presents it kind of lends itself to just be, of course, there's an ultimate reality. There's an ultimate creator. There's an ultimate person like that, or and that has an identity. So if it has an identity, it's a person, right?
Yeah.
I think that's also critical here. And I think that's, and once you get to that point, then understanding, well, if there is purpose, if there's purpose and causality, and there's, it's just not a bunch of random events, then there's probably a defined way about things that needs to be understood.
Yeah.
There's absolutes as far as truth goes. See, that's the other thing that's critical, right? Is truth. I mean, and this is why I do like Langan a lot, in that he does, it's truth at the bottom, at the end of the day, the tautological nature of things. That is it. What is absolutes? What is the truth? If you can get to that, you're onto something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and this is kind of what that whole road right there led me to the whole study about apologetics, and like how that, is there enough substantiated evidence to say Jesus lived and he was true, and he is who he says he was. That's it. So, that gets you that point. All power to it, But, I think his points on some of what God is spot on. I think there's more to it though than that. Now, also too, you're talking about God, who is a undefinable, unknowable in its full aspect, infinite being. So we're not going to know or understand everything about God. We can know enough to understand,
get ourselves in trouble.
And that's I told my wife this. I said, I'm smart enough to know I'm not smart enough.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm smart enough to know that I don't need to be smart enough.
Well, yeah. Well, there's that.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm smart enough to know that he laid out boundaries and requirements of me. Meet those boundaries, stay in those boundaries and meet those requirements, and I'll be okay. Right? Like, that's where I live with it. Because if we spent all of our time trying to figure out what the most omniscient being of the universe and the creator of all things is thinking, we will die before we ever get 10% of that figured out. If we get that much figured out. Right? So as much as I enjoy listening to Langan and people like that, it's very simple. Love God, worship God, believe in God, be faithful.
Well, and not try to be God, but try to emulate Christ.
Emulate the way that he treats people, right? Which I think is a very profound statement. I don't normally bring stories of my family into this, but my son got in the car today. I picked him up from school, and my youngest, he's very inquisitive and smart kid, and he's a straight A student. And he got in the car today and he said, "Dad, I had a conversation at school today about God with somebody." And you got to realize, man, this is a 13-year-old talking to me about this.
Right.
And he says, he goes, "My friend said, well, if you believe in God, you got everything to lose. But if you don't believe in God, you have nothing to lose." And Dylan goes, "I don't think that's true." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he goes, "Dad," he goes, "I believe that if you believe in God, you've gained everything. And if you don't believe in God, you've lost everything." And he said, and we got into a talk about people who are absence of God. And I said to him, "Son, the worst case scenario," I said, let's go to the worst possible thing, which is God doesn't exist. Let's just say that we've all been fooled, right? We drank the Kool-Aid. Jim Jones got us. And you spent your entire life loving people and praying for people's well-being and treating people with kindness and being concerned for their well-being and preaching love and understanding and salvation. You haven't lost anything. Because at the end, what's the worst they're going to say about you? He was one of the kindest people I ever knew.
Yeah, your attributes, your character still shines through no matter that.
So I think that at the bottom of this thing with Langdon, just like you said, I at the end of the day, he believes in God, and he believes that there is consequence to not believing in Christ, and he believes that the ultimate reality is God's glory, right? So as much as I may not agree with, being plugged into the ultimate reality and creating our own evil, at the end of the day, he believes that the Creator is all powerful and all knowing. And to me, it's a step ahead of a lot of what I'm hearing right now. So,
well, yeah, I mean, dude, this is what I meant by when I was talking about how, the biblical meta narrative is sufficient. It really is.
Yeah.
It's complete. It's done. Sola Scriptura, Scripture alone, glory alone, Christ alone. I mean, it's enough. Yeah. But if you're a nerd and a geek person like me,
and that you're turning me into,
that you just keep asking questions, and you keep looking at things, and you keep, because I'm just thirsty for it, man. I mean, that's just it.
Well, and that goes back to that whole wise counsel thing, right? Like, the reason I surround myself with the people I surround myself with is not only are they, at the end of the day, Reggie, you're family. And we had to talk about that earlier, and I explained what that meant. But I surround myself with people who challenge me. This was you challenging me, man. This was way out of my comfort zone. I think that's what this really is all about, right? Is being able to read something like Chris Langan and say, I want to challenge myself to know more, right? I think that's part of, those comfortable Christians. Oh, well, I know enough. But do you?
Well, it's a lifelong pursuit of knowing God more and more.
Yeah.
That you'll never get enough of.
Yeah. No.
And the one thing I'll leave CTMU with is that if the one thing he points to is identification.
Yeah.
And distinction in identification too, by the way. If you get nothing else, just understanding that your identity is important.
Yeah.
And how you define your identity is critical.
Yeah.
That it not only affects you, but it affects reality itself.
Yeah. It affects the fabric of everything.
The ecologies of everything.
Yeah.
Then that alone will get you a lot way there. Once you start contemplating your identity and who you are, what are you basing that on? Will establish yourself more than anything else.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, if you're even hinting at being a Christ follower, rooting your identity in Christ is everything, dude.
Yeah.
You want to be plugged into the ultimate reality. You don't want to be unplugged.
Yeah.
You don't want to see the world in any other way than what is real. So definitely, like, stuff like this can, push you towards that point to say you are significant. You're not nothing. You are part of something, no matter who you are, that is bigger than you can ever imagine.
Yeah. But your story is purposefully written into it.
Yeah, and causality and purpose. I mean, look, all those things. See, because there's so many other of secular philosophy that tells you none of that stuff is real.
Yeah.
Let's say there's no purpose, there's no meaning, there's nothing like this. There's a lot of secular philosophy lead you there. And there's a lot of sad people out there who believe that. But that is not the metamathematical a cognitive theory of anything. That is a delusion that is brought about from rooting your identity in the things that are deceptions, that are not real.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
It was.
I was, the whole goal of R&B Talks here is to challenge things, to promote masculinity, to give other men, and I mean anybody really, a layman perspective, even though we do kind of tend to use some big words sometimes, but
I think I think part of this is, as we grow, we try to help people grow with us, right? Like,
yeah. So this is also why I said, like, politics really is kind of, it's interesting, and we need to be engaged in politics, but stuff like this, to me, carries far more importance.
Well, far more weight in looking at our present and our future as far as where we're at, right? Like, there's no doubt about the fact that politics is fun, and culture is fun, but these are the things that help us understand our ultimate purpose.
Yeah. The other thing that's on another subject other than CTMU, it's been interesting seeing how fast this whole Trump transition team is. Good grief.
The Trump effect, right?
Good night.
Hamas is pulling out of Israel. Putin's ready to talk. The stock market has skyrocketed. And the best that the left can come up with is disinvite Trump voters to Thanksgiving. That's really the best they've come up with so far.
But here's I know we said we weren't going to talk about politics. I just wanted to.
Yeah, I got you.
But I've never once thought, that's a family member, and said, well, because you voted for somebody, I'm going to spit on your grave and I don't want to ever see you again.
I think that this is, I think part of this, Reggie, is the big flashing arrow pointing to what we were talking about the whole time. And that is simply this. When evil fails, it desperately attempts to cling on to any narrative that it can to keep itself in motion. And I'm going to, not particularly because I want to, but I'm going to really use MSNBC as kind of an example. There was an entire segment that I just caught because I was just watching some meltdown videos, and this MSNBC video popped up, and it was two people that are paid very well, literally sitting on national television telling the American public it is okay to disown your family members for the holiday because you didn't like where they voted. And to me, regardless of politics, it was the epitome of being petty.
Yeah, even there was an academic professor of mental. What was it? What was the title? I can't remember what it was, but it was somebody who was very reputable who teaches mental health studies or something like that, right? Suggested to disavow your relatives who voted for Trump.
Well, I think this speaks to the fragility of people's cause. I mean, if you are melting down and disowning family members and shaving your head and putting on blue bracelets and all these things that are going on right now, it is a clown show of epic proportions.
What is their identity at that point?
They don't have one.
Their identity is wrapped into an agenda.
Yeah.
not anything of substance.
No, here's the thing. Their identity was completely wrapped around a false narrative that fell apart. And now,
It's
because
destroyed.
their mental health isn't strong, they're clinging to anything that helps them hold on to this fragile identity
Yeah.
that fell apart. And I go back to this, and I've discussed this with several people. I've taken a lot of heat from people about being a Christian. Never once have I raised my voice. Never once have I gotten angry. Because I am confident in what I am. I don't need to. My belief system is not so fragile that if someone attacks it, it falls apart on me. I'm completely confident, completely capable of defending my faith, completely capable of defending who I am as a person, my faults as well as what you might consider my upside. I'm completely capable of staying calm and rational and having a lively discussion without insulting people and hurting people's feelings and suggesting that people do horrible things to their family members. But I look at this and it tells me how big, how massive of a bullet we dodged. Because if this was what was going to take control of our society, I don't know that our society could have sustained.
Well, okay. This is the kind of philosophy that all the other ancient civilizations that made it to a point developed, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, they all went away because they developed the same type of
The love of self.
and they let it run rampant, and then before it took over, and look, it didn't survive. Rome's a great example. Greece is a great example.
Greece example.
I mean, any of the great empires, dude.
Yeah.
This is what happens. But anyway, look here. I just wanted to bring that up because I just found it just wow. I would just hope that our anybody who's on the Christian perspective that is that we just keep the Christ-like attitude there. It doesn't mean you have to like everything that people say or believe, but but your family's your family, man. I mean, I have close family members that don't believe the same thing I do, but I don't disown them or nothing. They're still my family.
That's my family, man.
I mean, I've never thought, well, I'm just going to disown them.
Yeah. I've never once thought, you don't think like I do, so I just can't have anything to do with you. You got to get away from me.
There are circumstances where I'd say there's probably a case for that if it gets too wrapped up into something. Where it becomes combative all the time, then you kind of need to give space. But disowning things and like the few people who've said like stuff horrendous, like spit on the graves and all this nonsense.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's grief. It's tragic, man. It's tragic that you're so weak in position that's what you're going to do. And what's even worse about that is you have no self-awareness at all in that situation.
Yeah, you really got to look in the mirror.
You really have no idea how off the tracks you've gotten.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, Brian, that sums up episode 68.
68 episodes, Reggie. It's pretty
68.
fantastic.
I
Do me
know.
a favor, guys. Before we say goodnight, treat each other well. Treat each other well. If you agree, you disagree, treat each other well. Don't destroy people. That's not okay. Don't wish harm and hate on people. That's such a ridiculous, immature, childish, weak way of behaving.
Yeah.
Please don't do that. If you dislike somebody and you feel so strongly that you need to voice your opinion, sit down with them and talk. And then at the end of that conversation, shake hands, hug, and get on with living life.
We're R&B Talks.
I'm Brian.
I'm Reggie.
Good night, guys.
Bye-bye.